Hello and hi, I am Super Dude, and today I arrive on your screen to show you this. This is a post, originally from Tumblr, filtered to me through Reddit, that I will include on screen for your pause and reading pleasure. But to put it succinctly, this person is decrying the fall of multiplayer, and how modern designs encourage competitiveness to the detriment of plain fun community building, with a specific interest on microtransactions and battle passes part in all this. Those of you returning from previous videos can probably see why this would resonate with me, but there's something interesting in this post I hadn't considered in the multiplayer discourse. This line here. You could actually make some pretty decent random friends this way. Making friends. In reading that line, I recalled previous relationships forged through playing Gears of War, and some person dumping invites for a Minecraft gaming guild, which I promptly joined because Minecraft rules, and became fast friends with people playing all sorts of games I love, from Overwatch to Battlefield 4. People I knew for years before I eventually stopped playing Xbox altogether because it hasn't released anything I personally find interesting since the 360. Sometimes I'll turn on my Xbox One because it can play Dropout and the PlayStation can't, and I can see some of those people still on there, still using their guild tags more than a decade later. Love that for them. So is this another video where I complain about the changing times, shaking my fist at the heavens? No. Multiplayer games from the past and today still have plenty of opportunity to help people forge bonds, and I would like to share some of those games with you so you can perhaps make new friends of your own. While our old standouts for making new friends may have stagnated, new experiences can replace them, and perhaps even surpass them. This is gaming's third spaces, and I hope you find something in this video that's fun to experience together, with friends both new and old. Now, the term third space may not be familiar to some of y'all, so let me specify. The third space is a sociological concept meaning a third social environment separate from home or work. The third space is notable for being a place you choose to go to, higher up on your hierarchy of needs, fulfilling the desire for fun, relaxation, perhaps even a spiritual need. Third spaces are important for your social health as they allow you to be a person outside of your more societal obligations. Issue is, third spaces are disappearing. Both as a consequence of antagonistic design discouraging the homeless from being in public, and the COVID outbreak making them less safe, physical third spaces have been rendered less desirable than their online counterparts, because it's easier to make money here than here. As a result, hanging out in online forums is now more popular than ever, especially with people of my generation and the generations that sandwich it. Now, you may be thinking, what gives? I just said online third spaces are more popular than ever, and yet multiplayer is in decline? Pick a lane, what's the truth here? While this is purely anecdotal to both myself and my Tumblr friend here, it definitely feels like bond making is less common nowadays than it used to be, though in researching I noticed people have been making this claim for around a decade now. There are a couple of possibilities for why that is, but which sounds more likely to you? That I am nostalgic for Gears of War 3 and I have never recaptured that joy in the years since, or that multiplayer games have been trending for the worse, year over year, for almost an entire decade. And there may be some merit to that latter idea, what with the progressively aggressive monetization schemes that we've become inured to, the greater focus on competition due to the prevalence of esports and streaming leading to MMR matchmaking instead of dedicated lobbies, as well as Battle Royale's whole deal, which basically bars community building as a core conceit of the game. It's 100 enters, 1 leaves, not 100 enter and build a fabulous community for the homeless. Battle Royales are singular experiences, and they rarely give you the chance to even talk to your enemies, much less sing Kumbaya. But if you wanted to watch someone try very hard to pull that off, I recommend Pop Culture Detective's Searching for Humanity in Fortnite's Battle Royale. Very neat video exploring what it means to aggressively oppose a game's central verbs to try and find unintended win conditions within a digital system. Back on topic, these articles use the word worse, but I think different is more accurate. Games are bigger than they've ever been before, bringing a wealth of different types of people to the table, which causes a variability in experience and expectation. Some people don't come to games to meet people, they come to shoot the time away, both metaphorically and ludically. That wealth of people brings new design considerations. Though I don't personally have experience with this, World of Warcraft's sharding for retail and layering for classic are methods of dealing with server load, so you don't have egregious load times. But this has the secondary effect of making it hard to hang out with randoms consistently. Overwatch's looking for group mode was super useful as a way to find other people open to conversation. Hell, my sister-in-law found her current partner on Overwatch this way. But it was removed in early 2023 with the devs citing social and disruptive behavior problems that were never resolved as the reasoning. Splatoon's lack of voice chat is a safety measure to prevent tryhards from screaming slurs at children, but it also means every Squiddy in Splatoon can't openly communicate, which is restrictive at the highest levels of play. As video games grow in popularity, technical limitations or a well-meaning interest in people's safety leaves the social aspects of a game wanting. But consider what exactly it is we're leaving behind. There's this mocking phrase thrown around a lot, "You wouldn't have survived a Modern Warfare 2 lobby," which encapsulates the change I've seen in my lifetime. It was an online Wild West. Designers let anyone come into contact with anyone else, rarely with any features for dealing with bad eggs other than just muting them. Yes, I met some really funny people this way and made solid connections in my teens, but let's rethink this statement a moment. Whether or not you can tough out both the good-natured trash talk or the sexual threats to your mother or slurs, that's not the point. Is this fun? Does it feel good to hear these things? Because I never thought so. It wasn't the thing I'd looked forward to when I turned on Gears. And designers realized this, and thus put in more safety features, or made it harder to communicate in general because, hell, sometimes the best deterrent is simply making it so you can't. So if the old guard is no longer sufficient in finding friends, what replaced it? As a personal example, during this year's Game Awards, one of the first game trailers on display was the new project from the team that made Untitled Goose Game, Big Walk, that immediately captured the attention of all the people watching with me, because we all innately knew this game would be a great hangout game. And that is the difference. Games that encourage being together, with mechanics that simulate presence, encourage communication, or encourage a greater sense of community. As games slot into the role public parks used to fill, we crave more of these types of experiences, especially after the 2020 lockdown. These games are a stab at a digital third place, where people can exist and play together. Hopefully you find something to love in these titles, starting with the games that physically simulate that presence, Phasmophobia and Lethal Company. Both of these games are small-scale indie horror comedies produced by small studios. The first is produced by Kinetic Games, a team based in the UK whose first game happened to capture the COVID zeitgeist to her spell and inspired loads of copycats. The second is developed by Zeekers, a Roblox alumni who is just like a single person, and it also very recently became an icon, a legend, and it is the moment. Both games are in early access, though Phasmo updates all the time with a roadmap to let you know exactly what they're planning to do, and Zeekers has stated they plan for the game to be finished in around half a year's time, and given their development history, that seems likely. So, in case you have never been on YouTube, how did you find this video of all things? What do you do in these games? In Phasmo, you look for a ghost to pinpoint which room it's in, look for the various bits of evidence required to determine exactly what the ghost is, and if you do that, you win. You only learn the answer on mission end, however, and you make no money if you fail, and there are a lot of wrong answers, so your team must effectively coordinate their various tools to find the evidence and make that cache. Money can be spent on various pieces of equipment that make finding evidence easier, or provide alternative methods for making money, such as taking photos of evidence, including the ghost itself. Recently, they fleshed out the progression system more, adding new tiers of each diagnostic tool, making the game's progression take longer, but also have more efficient tools than the previous standard, rewarding your dedication to ghost hunting. There are also alternative tasks to complete on top of ghost identification, which can give you a bit of pocket change outside of the main task. One of the more frustrating / inspired design choices by the devs is that almost every piece of evidence comes with a % chance of not happening. It's perfectly possible no evidence appears at all, despite the ghost being capable of producing it. Thankfully, there are other, more esoteric factors to each distinct ghost to keep an eye out for that act as secret evidence, such as the demon's ability to hunt at any time, or the wraith's never stepping in salt. Overall, fun team game, with a heavier emphasis on horror than Lethal Company. While it certainly has its moments of horror, this guy in particular was forced to scream out of me multiple times, Lethal Company champions comedy far more than its other genre tag. Lethal Company tasks you with collecting scrap and doohickeys from the various abandoned moons of the retro future to sell to the company beast, hoping to meet your profit quota within 3 days' time. If you don't, things don't go well for you. Thanks to its structure being separated into days, there's a lot more meta decisions to make in Lethal Company than in Phasmo. When to play it safe, when to go someplace real dangerous, and how to deal with people dying are all important factors. Speaking of dying, one of the ways that teamwork is made mandatory in both games is in the consequences of death. Each piece of equipment past the bare essentials costs money in both games, but in Phasmo, death results in you losing the equipment you brought to this hunt. So the more upgraded toys you bring with you, the more significant a financial investment your life represents. Sure, you and yours are now decked out with all the best gear, but let's say you happen upon a summoning circle. Using it would allow you to take a really crisp picture, but also royally piss the ghost off and put you in mortal danger. Do you get that sweet pick? The dangers of the ghost become exacerbated by your sick gear, making the collective teamwork even more important. In Lethal Company, money is earned only upon dropping off scrap at the company's store, giving you your actual currency to spend on gear or accessories for the ship, both functional and less so. Deaths in the facility don't necessarily result in the loss of gear. If someone's left alive, they can grab your stuff. What is penalized is your funds, receiving a massive fine for each person lost, and though it can be reduced if you can retrieve their body, it can't be outright eliminated. Rather than everyone's personal drive for survival, Lethal Company's drive is communal. All of our funds for buying extra gear or replacements gets chipped away by death, to say nothing of the consequences of a full party wipe, so teamwork, as always, is vital. Both of these games feature a proximity chat, giving a personal presence that amps up the mood considerably. You can hear when someone's nearby, hear when they're in danger, and when the mic cuts...
I'm not dead!
Where's Eli?
We're dead!
Only have a suspicion of what happened to them. I've had the door slam in my face in Phasmo as the hunt begins and hear the screams on the other side. Or the multiple times I've charged ahead in Lethal Company only to tell them, I'm dying! And hear them laugh at me from beyond the grave as I am crushed, drowned, killed, etc. The prox chat allows audio to be a part of game design, like how talking attracts a ghost or eyeless dog, or your loud noises can sometimes drive away the more skittish enemies in company. They say nothing about its effects on communication. Too far away to be heard? Fog or rain obscuring your voice? Get a walkie-talkie. Is the person on the other side not responding? Are they dead? Do you go check? All decisions that only come about thanks to audio's integration into the game design. Both of these games are fun for a group, but speaking personally, I like one much more than the other. I find Phasmo to be really janky, with the inconsistent behavior of the ghosts to be more annoying than interesting. Yes, while it may be more realistic for the ghosts to be represented this way, that doesn't make it fun, and no, we will not be getting into video games and fun right now, that's later. Everyone else I know loves it though, so I tend to bite the bullet for the collective. Lethal Company though, I find more interesting. Remembering layouts, considering your tools on hand, trying to effectively coordinate gear extraction, and maintaining a map in your head of where you're going, all without considering the monsters both in and out of the facility, there's just a lot going on in any one game of Lethal Company, with an extra layer of gameplay on top of that tied up with the ship, which moons to go to, when to dump scrap. Both games are super interesting, and I recommend it to anyone. It's a super great way to make friends and... What's that? This is a game you'd play with people you already know because of coordination required? Basically, no one seriously uses public multiplayer? Yeah, I guess you got me on that. Okay, more traditional multiplayer, more traditional lobbies. Let's look into two other games, Mordhau and Hell Let Loose, a medieval war and World War II simulator respectively. Very different games with different styles of community building, but both are very fun if you like very simulationist designs. Starting with the sillier, Mordhau is a game where you play some form of warrior and take to battle against an enemy team in some siege scenario. You build your character with armor, gears, and weapons, most of which are unavailable to you until you build some cache through natural play. Combat itself is the bread and butter of the entire system and features a lot of depth. You can swing in a 360 degrees depending on the direction of your mouse, or a keybind if you have an MMO mouse I suppose, along with a thrust and a kick. As with any fighting game, attacks are composed of a wind-up, then the active damage window. During the wind-up, you can feint into a different attack, potentially provoking an enemy's block and allowing yourself a free hit. The block that I just mentioned denies any attack within a 1/3 second window, and if you're successful, allows for a riposte, follow-up attack with no wind-up whatsoever. You can't feint off of this, but it's quick, giving your opponent no choice but to block your blow or get hit. That's essentially the basics, but I promise you that's just the tip of the iceberg on this stuff. Kicks, swing manips, morphs, whether or not you or the enemy has a shield, to say nothing of movement's place in all this. There's a lot to consider in just a one-on-one engagement. Now add in ranged attacks from bowmans or throwables, environmental traps like boiled oil, cavalry running in and getting your ass, 1v2, or 3, or the entire army, and bards? Mordhau's combat mechanics are quite serious, bringing loads of depth to each engagement, allowing anyone to hone their craft for hours, just like any game in the more traditional fighting game genre. The people who play it though? Absolutely not. This is oft treated as a role-playing game, with people playing their part in the greater arena of medieval warfare. The bard is a prime example of this in action. Does the loot provide any sort of mechanical benefit to the bard or its allies? Nope, none. In choosing the loot, you are worthless to your team, and in playing it, you actively alert others to your presence. The loot is simply a meme pick, and just like Deep Rock Galactic's cheer button is a signal from the developers of what kind of game this is. It's a laugh, it's a hoot, and it's in no way a serious time, and the community easily reflects that. People are constantly chatting in this side window, being friendly, being trolls, just asking each other questions, hanging out, and the community is small enough that you're very likely to run into these people again. Mordhau's silliness, combined with the small scale of its community, means it's easy to find genuine blokes and form community in this small space. It might not be a dynamite multiplayer game with tens of thousands of players, but the mechanics are really solid and the vibes are immaculate here. And before I move on, there's a mod used in conjunction with the loot to play genuine songs in the game. I've heard people play Nickelback, Rasputin, the original version of At Doomsgate. It's great. Contrast that with Hell Let Loose, and you have a much different tone and style of community building. Hell Let Loose involves both teams dropping into the beautifully rendered version of some historical conflict from World War II as either the Americans or Soviets against the Germans. The goal is simple: advance on enemy territory, capture their points of interest, push them to the edge of the map, and win. Achieving that goal is another story. With various systems representing supply lines, how you replenish troops, the exceptionally low time to kill, to say nothing of the pyramid structure of the actual army you're a part of, makes this a very intense strategic experience. Hell Let Loose's setting of World War II doesn't really lend itself to jovial fun. There's no snare drum meme weapon in its kit. No, this game is a simulation of war and takes itself very seriously. It's hard to figure out where to start when talking about Hell, because there's a real density to the roles of combat and how they mesh to create the whole of the game. Starting at the bottom, the various infantry roles fit into various squadrons with different tasks dictated by their officer. Put a pin in them. The roles more or less follow the battlefield convention, though there are some more specific. Anti-tank is self-explanatory. Assault, automatic rifleman, and rifleman are damage roles ranging from close to medium ranges. Machine gunner seems like they should be grouped with those others, but their role is more support-based, laying down large amounts of suppressing fire and keeping positions locked down so enemies can't rush obvious entrances. Medic is also obvious, bringing back wounded soldiers as long as they weren't outright killed, keeping defenses filled with bodies to man them, or the front line supplied with soldiers. Engineers can repair damaged structures and create new ones, making a more defensive position at the cost of supplies. How do you get supplies, you ask? Through supply trucks or supply drops spawned by the commander, pin that, or the support role, which can drop a small box of supplies for immediate use, extremely useful to have in a pinch. Care must be taken when flying in supplies, as they're very visible and liable to draw enemy attention. The support role is the only way to produce supplies on command, making them essential to good play. Returning to the officer, this is the top infantry unit, maintaining their underlings and giving out orders from the higher-ups. They can build respawn points, one for all to use or just for their squad, and are able to communicate with every other officer, as well as the commander. It is through this network that the war is fought, decisions are made, and the match is hopefully won. There are a couple more specialized roles, such as the armor divisions, where teams of 3 handle a single tank, and the recon division, with a sniper capable of extreme engagements thanks to their scope, the only class with a scope in the game, mind you, and their spotter, which acts as the recon's officer, protecting the sniper and, spotting enemies for them to target. The spotter is also the only role capable of dropping respawn points in deep enemy territory, so there's a lot of upset potential in the spotter if they can successfully pick off their targets. Overseeing all of these units is the commander, but before I continue, I'd like to shout out Soul Sniper, who made a bunch of different guides detailing how Hell Let Loose works, and is the source I used for learning about the commander, because I am not prepared to jump into that role yet. So if the game sounds interesting and you want to improve, or hear what I'm about to say with vastly more detail, go check them out, they're fantastic. So the commander is essentially playing a different game from all the other roles. Earlier, I briefly touched on the relationship between engineers, commander, and support roles facilitated by supplies, but most of that system rests on the commander's shoulders. They can spawn new supply trucks to maintain supply lines, as well as drop them from the sky on command, which helps those resources be used by both yourself, as well as your engineers and officers. But there are 3 other resources the commander must consider that are specifically theirs to control: fuel, munitions, and manpower. Manpower can dismantle spawns remotely, place a temporary spawn behind enemy lines, increase capture rate of enemy locations. I got this wrong, it is strictly used for defense. It straight up doesn't work in hostile sectors. And increase effectiveness of resource nodes for a limited time. Munitions can be used to remotely spawn ammo drops, the aforementioned supply drop, a UAV that reveals a snapshot of where the enemies were when the plane flew by in that moment, and various planes for dropping a massive fuck you bomb, a cloud of bullets, or the very impressive bombing run, spraying bombs in a straight line, unless you're the Soviets, to crack open your opponents, destroying anything that isn't armor, useful to use after the UAV scan. Fuel is only used to spawn vehicles, whether they be supply trucks, transport, tanks, or some combination of those roles. A bit of these resources are generated naturally, but can be bolstered by building resource nodes, which is done by your engineers, but they require supplies to do so you can see how the supply system undergirds this whole thing. Maintain supply lines so your engineers can build resource nodes so you can effectively use your abilities as commander to lead the team. This is the full picture of the game. Supplies beget munitions, manpower, and fuel to power the commander's abilities. They communicate needs to officers, and the officers fulfill needs. Your squad may be pushing behind enemy lines, or defending an important point, or constructing resource nodes and bolstering defenses. The armor of both your side and the enemy's hopes to punch a hole through those defenses, taking out spawn points and weakening the other side's ability to replenish lost forces. The recon feeds information to the commander and nearby soldiers, as well as being the class's most equipped to deal with artillery, which I haven't even begun to talk about. The info fed into the officers by recon allows the leadership to come up with a plan for dealing with enemy movements, such as carpet bombing the opposition, or calling an anti-tank or the fuck you bomb on armor. From my typical perspective in the field, this game is a really simulationist military shooter. But for the commander, this is a real-time strategy game where every piece is a genuine person. But let's talk more about the actual play experience. Your character is slow, and death is quick. You can take maybe 2 shots before you go down, but if anything grazes your head, you're gone. And with each death on at least a 10-second cooldown, and your respawn points themselves being on their own timers, you're rarely getting back in immediately after that 10-second window. All this communicates the obvious: you don't want to die. Dying also puts you out of position, as your respawn can't be used if an enemy is too close to them, so you'll always be running in from a distance, always inconvenienced by your death. To make it back to point, you must consider the geography and your movement abilities to survive the trek. Running full sprint across an open field is obviously a bad idea, so you crawl through moats, crouch below stone walls, perform a go-for-broke sprint across no man's land to dive into the trenches, or throw a smoke to make that dangerous play just a bit safer. And all of that before considering artillery, tanks, or either commander's carpet bombing abilities. Sometimes you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're gonna have to be okay with that. There's a lot of random deaths you couldn't account for, but communicating these needs to your officer can help solve these problems. Again, communication is the whole point of this game, and everyone has an important part to play in that. But the opposite side of that coin is that this hierarchical chat structure, the necessity of supply trucks, engineers with resource nodes, good respawn points both for the individual squads and the entire army, that's a pretty complicated system, and it can fail at multiple points along this hierarchy. If people don't communicate, especially the officers, the army will be unable to react to the enemy's movements and will easily die as all the respawns are destroyed. If the army even bothered to do that, Jesus guys, it's the #1 thing! It is for this reason that you should look into the Discord servers and keep them in mind when you play. There are multiple servers that exist for this sort of thing, including Soul Snipers, whom I mentioned earlier. I know I was just talking about how deficient the game is without communication, but with it, it really sings. I can tell you from personal experience playing my favorite type of class that people really appreciate when I come to their rescue. I run up to them, and as they lay dying, they're trying to communicate enemy positions to me so I can pop the bad guys and be the hero. And if there are no enemies around, they're always thankful all the same, telling me I love you sometimes. And while you're going to get people who are taking this too seriously, as with any military shooter, there are just as many people who are here dorking around and having a good time. Hell Let Loose, through its mandatory communication layer, allows for interesting stories to manifest and great times to be had with would-be friends. It's a very nerdy shooter, but I recommend it to anyone looking to find some friends online. What's that? These are both simulation-heavy mechanics games? They're too niche for you. Ugh, fine, let's look into what's popular then! Valheim and Minecraft are 2 survival games, one made by Iron Gate Studios, a team of 5-10 that legitimately changed their publisher's perspective on how to publish after its release, and the other which you've definitely already heard of. As a result of Minecraft being the most played video game ever, I will basically never bring it up other than to gesture at it from Valheim's perspective, because I got some news for you. This game? It's just Minecraft. The building and crafting mechanics, the indirect heal method, the boss fights that require your careful preparations of tools and heal items. I know they're in the same genre, so they're obviously going to share a lot of design traits, but I do believe these two are closer relatives than, say, The Forest or Subnautica, or even Terraria. Valheim drops you into the world with only your threadbare knickers and a dream. To defeat the 6, and likely more in development, bosses of the world, bring their skulls to the altar, and sacrifice them in Odin's name to gain some helpful buff, which we'll get into a bit later. To defeat these bosses requires some sacrificial material to summon them, then you fight, and if you prepared well and kept your wits about you, you'll win. But you won't be able to do that with your bare hands. You'll need weapons, armor, and healing items, and these things don't grow on trees. To produce your first items, you'll need a crafting station, and a crafting station needs a roof, which brings us to the building mechanics. Unlike a plethora of construction games before or since, Valheim's devs decided to give their construction a structural integrity system that forces your builds to be realistic in proportion and materials. No random sky factories or dwarf homes for the Viking. We build mead halls in these parts. When any construct is placed on the ground, it appears as blue in the integrity screen. The further and further away we get from a structurally integral point, we move from green to yellow to red until we reach this dark red, and then it collapses under its own weight. Side note, it's quite fun to knock out the support beams and watch the whole thing collapse as the game goes, uh-oh, where'd the supports go? This means the minimum effort needed to achieve a functional building is higher for Valheim than many of its construction peers. This is basically all you need for Minecraft. I got my bed, I got my crafting and furnaces, chests. What more does a Swede need? The ancient Swede is much pickier about their houses. They need a fire and a roof. Oh, and also the smoke from the fire will choke out your house and kill you, so you need to make a chimney as well. There is a lot more to consider about the Valheim home, but I personally find it more engaging to build a house in this system because of those constraints. I tend to just make big empty rooms in Minecraft because I'm not an interior decorator and I tend to be pretty Spartan about my living spaces anyway. But in Valheim, these rooms are important because that wall is load-bearing and you must consider how exactly you're going to make your designs a reality. It makes the giant castles and mead halls all the more impressive when you realize everything has to be structurally sound in order to function. As you venture to fight the other bosses, you'll come into contact with metals that can be refined into stronger equipment, or build new crafting stations for making other cooler food and goods. Upon first grabbing bronze, you'll gain access to genuine boats and carts, which allows you to perform resource logistics at long or medium range. Helps with grabbing even more of that ore, which is kind of the central gameplay loop in terms of boss fights. Go find metal, mine it, bring it back. Smelting is itself an intense process, requiring coal, which takes wood, a lot of wood, and we kind of run into a wall here. I've sort of been beating around the bush on this front, but Valheim is a really slow game, all told. The sailing mechanics are interesting and force you to consider wind conditions as you're traveling, but those same mechanics can leave you paddling your way home if the wind doesn't favor your journey. Smelting takes a bit of doing, resource acquisition is much the same. I previously mentioned that building is very in-depth and considered, but a consequence of that is that it's also slow. Minecraft is this way to a lesser degree as well. Most things in the world are set on timers, so there's a lot of waiting for things to get done. For Minecraft, that means giving yourself time to explore or dedicate yourself to other tasks, but in Valheim, where nearly everything is slow, sometimes the answer is just to wait. Now, you may be tempted to call this bad game design, but let's stop and consider Valheim's goals for a moment. With the large health pool of certain bosses coupled with their potential damage resistances, and how long it takes to level up in various equipment types, it's pretty clear that you're not supposed to take on these bosses alone. This aspect by itself suggests Valheim's overall goal of multiplayer cooperation. Taking that into account, everything in the game being slow means all your mates can dedicate themselves to a different task and hop to it, each contributing to the greater whole in some small way. My fiancée chops down trees and deals with crops. Her sister is our resident builder. Bear here likes animal husbandry as well as attempting to domesticate the monsters, and I am our logistics guy, mining and processing resources so these guys can just pick up the game and play when they want to join in. They don't have to worry about metal, I took care of that for them. These powers I mentioned earlier each give different buffs that cater to different gameplay styles, further lending to the idea that you should be divvying up these tasks. And the fact that sometimes the best thing to do is just wait pushes the game into that third space category of hangout game. Remember when I mentioned third spaces earlier? Lethal Company and Phasmo physically represent the space with directional audio, but in Valheim, sometimes the only thing left to do today is relax, wait a spell, and just talk, you know? There are so many different gameplay mechanics that you can root into and make your own, both in terms of combat and entire systems, that each person can have their personal contribution to the whole, expressing themselves in completely unique ways, as well as moments of rest built in where you can just check in on others and see what they're up to. It's almost a community simulator all its own. Now, if you have no friends prior to these games, how do you meet others? For Minecraft, the answer is varied. You can purchase a server yourself for your friends or use a server farm, which gives you less freedom over server settings in exchange for it being free to you. Or you can look up a server and connect to it, potentially come into contact with hundreds of other people. For Valheim, it's a little less obvious. You could look up servers online, but most of them are established on some Discord server you'll need to connect to, but there's no in-game way to do that. You know, maybe that's part of the reason why this is happening. As you've no doubt noticed, none of these games are the perfect multiplayer game. Some are niche, some require friends up front, and the bulk of them depend on Discord servers to function. That bears stressing. A lot of communal games nowadays use third-party digital third spaces as a supplement to their own community building on sites like Reddit or Discord. Here, we can participate in communities at a remove from the actual software they're championing, which is a newish trend. The issue is, we can move one step further away, to the friendly neighborhood Discord, and just never interact with people outside of our safe zones if we want. This is my personal reason for failing to make new friends in video games. The stranger is scary. The friend Discord is familiar. I don't need to open myself up to others if I just commit to playing the finals with friends exclusively, right? Perhaps that's part of the answer as well. Discord servers encourage fragmenting into smaller and smaller groupings, and I have definitely fallen into this comfortable pattern myself. So, for my own benefit, and maybe to shake you out of it too if it applies to you, make sure to turn off the Discord and turn on the local chat every now and then. While it's certainly a less structured experience, you invite the possibility of new friendships, or at least interesting stories to tell to the friends you have now. Games are so big now that they don't have to be everything to everyone. They can find their small pockets and dedicate themselves to being perfect in those small ways. So whether it's something niche, something dumb, or inherently community building by design, try to step out of your comfort zone every now and again. Which is advice I need to follow as well, believe you me. Concluding this at hyperspeed because I already said it once and don't want to waste my time. Are multiplayer games worse now? Not worse, different. The combination of current market trends, the growth of games as a sport, and the societal shock of COVID changed what we look for out of multiplayer, and the landscape continues to change. Here are some games that I think do a good job maintaining friendships and communities in the modern context. Phasmo and Lethal Company simulate the presence of real life with spatial audio that lends itself to great horror comedy experiences. Mordhau, a mechanics-rich medieval sword-fighting game, has a dorky community that's fun to goof off with, in stark contrast to Hell Let Loose, the World War II simulation shooter that makes communication mandatory. And Valheim, a game whose slow, methodical pace encourages jumping in with friends and establishing a community together. I also mentioned Minecraft, but Minecraft doesn't need a shout-out. It's Minecraft. Each of these games is great at forging new and maintaining old friendships, and most are pretty cheap, so I encourage you to get in there and experience them with others. I am Superdude. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching, and I appreciate the patience everyone has shown over the holidays. I would like to, as always, thank my patrons who allow me to save just a bit of money every month thanks to their generosity. If you like what I do here and would like to see me do this more, consider subscribing and Patreoning, because that money is consistent in a way YouTube ads are not, which allows me to better plan my living and eating arrangements, and therefore keep doing this. So yeah, that's the video. That's not a fake framing device, by the way. I really did see that Tumblr post, and it made me and do a think about it, and I present to you all these games. But obviously I'm not a monolith. There are plenty of other games that I don't know of or didn't think of that are good for making friends or playing with friends, so I encourage you to tell me about those in the comments. Maybe I'll talk about them in the future. So yeah, I am Superdude. Thanks again for watching.